First up this morning, we're going to catch up on a story you probably heard during the news last week. Hundreds of concerned residents came together for a public meeting in Gowerton last night to discuss a huge potential increase in their ground rent. Swansea Council has reviewed ground rent fees on the Elba estate for the first time in 25 years. As a result, some residents will see increased charges from £50 a year to more than £2,500. Attending last night's meeting was Gowerton's independent councillor Susan Jones and resident James Gwyther, and they're both on the line with us now. Very good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What happened at last night's meeting then, James?
Well, it was firstly a fantastic turnout by everyone from Gowerton. I don't know the exact numbers as yet, but it just showed the amount of people were there, that how many people are affected by it. It did go quite well. There was some professional advice given to us all, and the general consensus seemed to be that everybody was wanting to work on this and fight this together. And a great community feel there, really.
Just reading sort of the bare bones of that story at the start and listening to it in the news last week, it's kind of incomprehensible to get those figures into my head properly. What sort of ground rent increase will you be facing, James?
Well, for me personally, I went from £50 a year up to £2,434 a year. So an increase of over 4,700%. Wow.
Okay, that does put it into some sort of stark contrast for me. Susan, as far as the council are concerned, I'm guessing you're not surprised by the turnout yesterday.
No, not at all. You know, it's been a very stressful time for the residents. There are many on fixed incomes. There's old age pensioners and first-time buyers who have already stretched budgets. These amounts of money are horrendous and just unacceptable and impossible to pay for some, you know. So a lot of them will have to think about selling homes. But this problem you've got, who will buy?
I wonder.
It's making this estate unsellable.
Yeah, I just wonder, though, playing devil's advocate for a moment, 25 years that the leases have been this low. If you don't review something for 25 years, then you know the increase is going to be massive. The rise, you know, it probably covers the costs that haven't been looked at over those 25 years.
Well, I disagree with that, really, because if you compare us to other leaseholds that are out in Swansea alone, nobody is paying anywhere near the figures that we're looking at the moment for our revised rent. I don't think we can argue with the fact that there is a clause in our lease agreement where there is going to be a review after 25 years.
Every 25 years.
That is unique in itself from what we understand so far. But to go up by 4,700% is absolutely scandalous. If we look at the houses or the prices when they were bought brand new to where they are now, they've possibly gone up double or threefold, whereas my ground rent's gone up 50 times. So I wouldn't agree with a comment of expecting an increase that high.
Susan?
No, you know, if you look at the cost of living, £50 in 1989 is now worth £108.
Yeah.
Nowhere near the percentage that people are being asked to pay. You know, the majority of rents down there were either £50 or £75. We have some lady from one area going from £75 to £1,844. It's an impossible, and that's yearly.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's not the one-off.
That's a huge amount on her budget. It's just an impossible amount to find on top. We're already stretched. We have many public sector workers that live on that estate. They've had no pay rise for at least 5 years, and if they have, 1%. Where do people get this extra money from? Pluck it from the air, as I think the figures have been done. You know, as James has said, the houses have gone up maybe twice, 2.5 times their cost, and the ground rents have just gone up. Some at 5,000% increase.
James, I don't know anyone who would have this sort of savings in the bank, you know, unused or unbudgeted for something else. Does anyone have this sort of money around to pay it?
No, not at all. You know, you're absolutely right in what you say. It's not a matter of not wanting to pay it. We physically can't pay it. You know, for us personally, it would be extra £200 a month. I just physically haven't got that money, and everybody you talk to in the Elba has exactly the same opinion. They just haven't got the money to physically do it. So we haven't got a choice here. It's not a matter of just saying, yes, we'll pay it. We physically can't pay it. And the consensus is, we're gonna fight it and get it to a reasonable conclusion.
The first moment, though, when you open up the letter, because you get the letter through for your ground rent, as you normally do, you're looking for 50 quid being on it, and you get one that says 2,000 odd. How do you deal with that sort of emotion?
Well, it was a bit surreal, to be honest. My wife opened the letter and burst out crying. And I actually laughed because it was such a bizarre figure. I just assumed it was a mistake. Yeah. And I just thought one phone call on Monday would sort it out. The fact that the council sent the letters out and we received them on a Saturday morning, I think is a disgrace in itself, because there was no one for us to turn to until the Monday morning, so we had to sit in it all weekend. There was people on the estate who were elderly residents living on their own. They had no one to speak to, no one to help them for 3 days after receiving that letter, and that alone, I think, is a massive mistake and scandalous that the council have done that.
Let me, Susan, read you a statement, because we invited Swansea Council onto the programme. They sent us a statement instead. Swansea Council spokesperson said, as part of the lease agreement, these properties have their rent reviewed every 25 years. We've now assessed the properties as part of the 25-year renewal, and we've informed the leaseholders of the amount payable in rent, which is based on the open market rental value for the individual sites. This is in line with our legal duty to get the best value and will help ensure we continue to deliver the best possible services to taxpayers right across the city. Each lease gives householders the opportunity to refer the rent review to an independent arbitrator to resolve if parties are unable to agree the revised rent. That's the Swansea Council statement.
Yes, it's at the minute. Last night's meeting, we also had the deputy leader of the council there and the cabinet member for finance, who at least are going to come to the table and negotiate. The rents that are there need to be fair and reasonable, and it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Gowerton residents are city and county and Swansea taxpayers. It's an impossible amount for them to pay. We have as I say, lots of people that live on the estate. Some of them live within the estate that are employed by the council, who have had wage reductions because of single status. They have a duty of care to the residents of Gowerton as well. This isn't an affluent area. We have a lot of poverty pockets within this area. As I say, single mums have stretched budgets to be able to live on the Elba. We have old age pensioners who have downsized there. We have fixed incomes. A lady that rang me had only been widowed 6 weeks ago and now has a bill for over £1,500 a year. That doesn't mix with what we are, a caring authority in my eyes.
James, were emotions high at the meeting? Because I
was inundated with calls.
Really?
People crying on my phone on the weekend. I was down at the Elba and people were just aghast. They've made a mistake. The decimal point's in the wrong place, for goodness sake. This cannot be right,
Yeah.
It's horrendous, and people's stress levels are right up. I've got residents down there that haven't slept for a week. And I was hoping to put an emergency motion into council this evening, because full council is tonight. But I've heard that motion, the emergency motion, has been refused. The deputy presiding officer doesn't think this matter's of an urgent nature. Not an urgent matter, I'm informed. So this emergency motion is not going on to council tonight.
James, the meeting last night, it must be very difficult to keep your emotions in check, because you've got a large group of people, all of whom are going through the same situation. It must be hard just not to rant and rave about it.
Yeah, I think you're right, and people's emotions were running high, but at the same time, I think we all as a group of residents acted respectively. We certainly showed respect towards the councillors who turned up, Christine Richards and Rob Stewart. Yes, they didn't have an easy job to do, but it could have been an awful lot worse for them. I think it just showed how close the community are and how determined we're going to stay sensible, we're going to stay calm, and that we're going to fight this. And yes, people are massively upset. As Sue said, everybody is stressed, but we've got to work together, and we've got to do it and fight this in a reasonable way.
How are you going to go about it, though, James? Because it doesn't sound as though you don't have this money in the bank. You run a small business. If you could generate $2,500 more from your business, I'm sure you would have done it anyway, because that would be a great way of making more money. But how are you going to get this money?
Well, we're not going to be able to get the money. That's a matter of fact. So if it stays like it is, we will not be able to pay it. But that can't be the conclusion from this. The council have told us last night that they are open for negotiation. So that's going to be, I would imagine, the path that the committee that was formed last night are going to probably look to go down that road. It does seem a bit absurd. Yes, they've come up with these facts and figures, but have they started at a really high figure for us to negotiate and then come down to a figure that we feel that we've had success, but really, the rent has still gone up far greater than it should have in the first place. So whoever does the negotiation for us at the council, I think, has got to be very clever, very shrewd, and know exactly what they're doing.
James, thank you for giving us a bit more insight into it, and best of luck with things. That's James Gwyther. Susan, thank you for your time as well. I'm sure we'll hear more about that council meeting this evening. That's Susan Jones, who's independent councillor for Gowerton. If you're on the Elba estate and your ground rent has gone up by a ridiculous amount, then 03700 100 110 is the number if you want to get in touch with us. Swansea Council gave us a statement earlier in the programme. They've updated that statement and sent us a new one now, so I'll read you that. As part of the lease agreement, these properties have their rent reviewed every 25 years. We've now assessed the properties as part of the 25-year renewal and informed the leaseholders of the amount payable in rent, which is based on the open market rental value for the individual sites. This is in line with our legal duty to get the best value, and will help ensure we continue to deliver the best possible services to taxpayers right across the city. Each lease gives householders the opportunity to refer the rent review to an independent arbitrator to resolve if parties are unable to agree the revised rent. Independent advice given at the meeting last night confirmed that the council had acted correctly and in line with the lease. So that's an updated statement that Swansea Council have sent us in the past few minutes. Let's talk to Wyn Williams in Gowerton, who's phoned us. Wyn, how are you? Okay?
I'm good. Good morning, Jason.
Steffan here. Jason's off
Steffan,
at the moment. It doesn't matter at all. Your story is far more important. Tell us your relation to the Elba estate.
Right. So as you said, my name is Wyn Williams, and I don't actually live on the Elba estate, but my sister does.
Okay.
And she was so distraught last weekend when the letters were received that I had no choice really but to come down to help her in any way I could. And having just heard you read out that revised statement from Swansea City Council, I have to say I'm still kind of incredulous at that, because nobody is doubting that what they're doing is legally correct. But the question here, whether it's morally fair to do that. I mean, this land that the Elba estate is lived on, the Swansea City, or the Slieu Valley Borough Council, sold that to Westbury Homes 25 years ago. It's not as if they haven't had any money for this. And at that time, they retained the right to charge a peppercorn rent for the houses here, which people have been paying for the last 25 years. And of course, that it was to be reviewed after 25 years, and they've done that. But, they would expect a reasonable increase in land rent, not these astronomical values.
So how much has your sister's rent gone up?
Well, she was paying £50 a year, and now that has gone up to £2,557. And my sister is on a fixed income.
Yeah.
And, there's absolutely no way that she can afford to pay these sums of money.
Yeah, so what was her reaction when that letter came through on Saturday?
Well, she was completely distraught. She could hardly put her words together, and it took me quite some time to calm her down, to try and figure out what on earth had gone wrong. And when she told me exactly what the situation was, I was absolutely incredulous. But I was also rather, I have to say, to be honest, there were various members of the council at the meeting last night, and various of the cabinet members for Swansea City Council were there, and they spoke very reasonably, and they expressed a great deal of sympathy for the situation. And I think there was an understanding that what they're asking is completely unreasonable and unfair. And they're not obliged to follow. I mean, there's good deal of conversation here that they're obliged to follow what exactly it says in the lease and obtain best value for the council. Well, the council is obliged to do what's fair and have a good deal of regard for the wealth of the people in the county. And on the one hand, the council is saying they have some sympathy. And then I think I heard Councillor Sue Jones, earlier on your programme, that said that she had put an emergency motion forward to be discussed, for this issue to be discussed at council, and the deputy presiding officer has apparently said now that even though they've got an empty agenda for tonight's council meeting, even though they've got an empty agenda, he does not think that this matter is important enough to be discussed. So he's thrown that motion out. I find that absolutely shocking. It may not be important to some of the members of the council, but it's incredibly important to the people of the Elba estate who are having difficulty sleeping every night, not knowing if they're going to be able to continue living in their homes.
I'm sure they might argue that
emergency.
I'm sure they might argue that they discussed that last night.
Sooner rather than later.
In terms of the increases in money, one wonders if you increase it by such an amount that the people actually can't afford to pay it, what the point is of increasing it by that much.
Absolutely.
Because you're not going to get the money.
You might think that if these people are going to be thrown out of their homes by the council, they might have to provide council homes for them to move into.
Does your sister worry that might happen, Wyn?
Well, nobody knows at the moment. The council, the councillors who were there this morning, members of the cabinet, were expressing some sympathetic words, but it's not sympathy that the people need in this estate; it's action. And we're looking towards the Labour Council now to carry out, to go forward in a sensible matter, in line with what they expressed last night. But let's see if that happens. And I have to say, it's such a large Labour majority in Swansea City Council. They are the decision makers here. And I was looking at David Phillips, of course, is the Labour Council leader, the City Council leader. And I was looking at his the message that he put out in 2012 when he was standing for election. And in his manifesto, he said that Labour Council was going to stand for fairness for families and children. And it was going to be a can-do council. That's what he says in his manifesto, which is still online. And what David Phillips has told me so far is that he cannot do it. He cannot do it because he has to follow what he's told. Well, our elected city councillors are supposed to be there to stand up for fairness against the nonsense that is being put forward. If elected members don't stand up for us, who is going to? Given
that Swansea Council have released us a couple of statements while we've been on, there's a very good chance that we're on in the council offices at the moment and they're listening to what you're saying right now, Wyn. What would you say to them directly if you had the opportunity?
Well, I would say that their actions, whether it's done deliberately or carelessly, have devalued these houses overnight by £50,000. These houses that are private houses that people have put their life savings into, these ordinary hard-working people have lost half their life savings overnight. The council need not to look to what they can do to squeeze as much money, as much revenue out of this small group of houses. They should be looking to do what's right and what's fair.
Wyn, thank you for your insight into the story. I appreciate you running us through what your sister's going through as well. If Swansea Council are listening, there is still an open door here. If you want to come on the programme and give your side of things in much more depth than you can in a written statement, then if Mr. Phillips, the council leader, is listening and he wants to come on board as well, there are plenty of opportunities during today's programme. If you want to come on tomorrow as well, the door is open to you.